As I was reading through the Ephesians passage, it sounded somewhat familiar to me. And then I figured out why. I'd seen it on Heather's blog, the phrase, grounded and rooted in love. Just outside on the other side of this wall, you'll see also, it sounds like about 3 years ago, many of those who were here put construction paper together and made shoots and flowers to live out that grounded and rooted in love. And then also a couple of years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, there was the theme for retreat, for fall retreat, actually also came from this Ephesians passage. The part about more than we can imagine, right? Thinking about what God would have in store. So it's somewhat with these patchings together of knowing that this is truth, that this is the soil of KC, that this is part of those fields and pastures of which we walk and of which we live and learn and love, even for transplants, right? I know that some of you, this may be your very first time at this church. Have faith, take heart. This is my 5th Sunday. And I've got these newbie eyes, and I'm trying to take it all in. I'm so thankful for 2 times in a month getting to do table talk, perhaps a rarity, and for the abundance of smells and the food that fills our 6-course kind of table over there. I'm grateful for all of these things. I want to share just a brief story with you, and then we'll be having time together to hear from each other today, especially as we hear the familiar, for those who've been there 41 years maybe, and then we hear the message, something that comes to us as an interpretation from Eugene Peterson of this sacred and holy text. Maybe a part of it, as Jerry will invite us, will resonate with you on this particular occasion. I want to highlight the importance of this oil. A little goes a long way, right? Little goes a long way. Last fall, it was time for my daughter Phoebe to get a haircut, and thankfully I'd given up doing it myself. There were enough times in which she had crooked bangs that we figured we should get to the hairdresser. And as we got there, I was a little perplexed when at the end of the cutting, the hairdresser called me over and called my attention to the top of her scalp. And there I saw something there that I had not seen for quite some time, cradle cap. And maybe parents out there, those who've cared for a child, know what cradle cap is. Right? It's that little piece of scalp, the skin that seems to kind of peel away right at the top where your membranes are coming together and forming, and they don't kind of get together until at least you're 2, because it takes a while for your brain to decide it wants to come together. And I was surprised because she's 4, right? And I thought that this was only something for newborn babies. And so I was slightly embarrassed. Had I not been caring? And she said, no, it happens. And she then proceeded to want to sell me the fancy shampoo and the little comb that comes there at the store. And I was like slightly taken in. I was like, there's another way. I just can't remember how we took care of it before. And there was a mom sitting by the door, and she whispered to me, she said, just get a little oil, leave it on a while, wash it off. I was like, yes, that's it. That's it. So we left, and later that evening, that's what we did. After bath time, I got a little bit of oil, and this precious, now 4-year-old, I rubbed in that oil and kind of let it sit for a little bit, and then proceeded to comb it out. Aren't we sometimes in our physical beings just in such flux? The mental health that we live into as our brains would continue to come together, some of times firing more in full circuit, and sometimes it takes us a longer time and we're a little bit slower and we forget, just as I did, how to get rid of the things that we need to. Sometimes that is true of our souls too, that there's a time in which we need to flush, we need to recognize of that which we let go. And sometimes we acknowledge so very much that we come to the taste of our mortality. And we are indeed in this valley, the shadow of death. And I love this psalm as it blends and winds the heavenly with the earthly. And so perhaps because I've so many times been at deathbeds or otherwise at funerals, at that window of the here and the there by which we can share these words, and have a sense of trust, of being led along when we most need comfort and we most need care, because these bodies, these persons, these places God has called us to inhabit are in flux and constantly changing, and we need a sense of that steady presence. Some of you find KC to be that steady presence. Even if you've spent some time away, you come back here, and there's something about this house of love that just keeps winning you over. And although sometimes we get cranky, sometimes we have some gripes, sometimes we have a sense of the exact way that things need to go, you keep coming back anyway because the ears are open, and there's a trust and a belief that we are in touch with the Spirit here. Now, I know for some that reality of death comes all too soon, like for Nathan Flynn, the firefighter in Howard County, the first career firefighter of Howard County, passed away this past week. Thinking not only of what it meant for his wife and for his 5 children, but also for the entire fire fleet of the whole state, but especially this county and area. I give thanks that folks like Jack were on call and could be there at the hospital as he came and could minister to other firefighters as needed when that valley of death comes all too close and all too soon. Here we are this morning. Of course, not knowing how many days, how many steps of pasture we all have yet to go. But I give thanks that a newborn baby turns into a 4-year-old and a 40-year-old and an 80-year-old. And I give thanks that even though I didn't get it just right with Phoebe, that she continues to find a way. For you see, she's got everything new just like I do. And sometimes her frustration and her anger is just at the surface these days. And I go to the absolute end of my patience to find some way for some word of what I can offer that things are going to be okay. For sometimes, like us, she doesn't have all the words to describe exactly where these angers and frustrations are coming from. But they project outward, and sometimes they get sent to somewhere else or someone else, even if it may not be fully deserved. Where are you today? What can you let go of, allowing light to come into your heart so that it's not being projected elsewhere? Because I tell you what, our world needs a whole lot of projection of love. And the more we work on ourselves and get all oiled up from the inside, the more that we can take that on out with us. Now, the day after I had done the oil that night and into the morning, I did not help my daughter get dressed. It was my husband who was upstairs. And when she came down for breakfast, I was aghast. For you see, a little bit of oil goes a long way. Not only would there be a greasy spot on her pillowcase, but her whole head was just oily. It would just look like somebody had just doused her. And everything in me said, take that kid on upstairs and get that washed out. But I didn't. There's just something too biblical about this excess, right? And the reminder that a little bit of God's love is echoing and going forth and going in places we cannot imagine. And so, just as Phoebe was doused by the Spirit, I encourage us today to know that although a little goes a long way, the abundance of God's love, do you hear it pouring forth and running over? There is enough, right? Even in those places where you feel like there's not going to be enough resources, there's not enough civility in this world. Perhaps we don't have enough humility. Perhaps we don't have enough compassion. But we are reminded that even with our enemies, that the oil is available and it's irresistible and it'll spread out even more than you can imagine.